Turkish 1951, listening 210, clear approach 18 right.
Left 210, clear 18 right, Turkish 1951.
Turkish 1951, contact tower, runway 27 on the line.
1820, now we thank you, sir. 7 tower, good morning, Turkish 1951, 18 right.
Turkish 1951, good morning, runway 18 right, clear to land, wind 210 at 9.
Clear land, thank you, 1951.
1951, 262, please go around, just 262, go around.
Go around, yeah, 262.
1951, yeah, 262, do you see something on the ground which happened over there?
The year was 2009, February 2009. The flight was scheduled to depart from Istanbul, Turkey to Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam. Well, fun fact is that Istanbul used to be the capital of the Roman Empire. Back then, it was known as Constantinople. Hagia Sophia Grand Mosque in Istanbul used to be a church called the Church of the Holy Wisdom. It was Mehmed the Conqueror who conquered Constantinople, now Istanbul, that brought back an end to the Byzantine Empire. Sultan Mehmed then claimed the title Caesar of the Roman Empire. Istanbul is rich in history, and do visit Turkey whenever you have the chance. Like I said, they were flying to Amsterdam, the dam on the river Amstel, the capital and most populous city of the Netherlands. Sometimes Amsterdam is referred to as the Venice of the North because it has so many canals. Best part of Amsterdam is you can cycle there with peace of mind. There are many biking lanes spread throughout the entire city. Those who are football fans know that Amsterdam is home to Ajax, a renowned football team. Anyway, the aircraft that they were using was the state-of-the-art Boeing 737-800 that was 7 years old. The aircraft was delivered to Turkish Airlines in March 2002. It was a line training flight, and so there were 3 pilots in the cockpit. Seated on the left is a 54-year-old captain who was a former Turkish Air Force fleet commander. Very experienced guy who is conducting training for the guy seated on the right. The first officer is a 42-year-old man who is an ex-military pilot. He has many hours in the Air Force but is rather new on the Boeing 737. Because he has flown less than 20 sectors for Turkish Airlines, there is a safety pilot seated on the jump seat. A safety pilot is there to ease the workload of the flight crew in case something happens. The safety pilot is 28 years old and is fairly experienced. Initially, everything was going on smoothly. As they begin their descent, they receive a lot of clearances from air traffic control.
Turkish 1951, stand firm. Heading 300, descend to flight level 150, and your speed 300 knots or greater. Heading 300 or greater, speed 300 or greater, heading 300, descend 1951.
This was a busy airspace, and the pilots did a great job controlling the aircraft energy during the descent. Schiphol Air Traffic Control vectored the pilots to this position called RT and to descend to 7,000 feet.
Turkish 1951, descend to flight level 100 to be leveled by RTIP, maintain the speed.
They were transferred then to Schiphol Approach Control. Once they contacted approach, they were cleared to Sierra Papa Yankee VOR and to descend to 4,000 feet. Then, something unusual happened. The landing gear warning suddenly starts sounding. Normally, this warning only comes out to remind the pilots that the landing gear is not down when they are coming to land. It is connected to the aircraft landing configuration and most importantly the radio altimeter of the aircraft. So first, we need to discuss on the radio altimeter. Well, do check out this video if you want to know more about how the Airbus radio altimeter works. The radio altimeter is essentially an electronic device that is used to measure the height of the aircraft above terrain that is immediately below the aircraft. For the Boeing 737, there are two radio altimeters. It has a sender and receiver antenna at the bottom of the aircraft. So the sender sends a radio frequency, shooting it to the ground, and once it bounces back, the receiver antenna is there to receive the signal back again. The computer then calculates the time it took for the signal to return, and that translates to the height of the aircraft relative to the ground. When the captain looked at his radio altimeter, it shows a -8 feet reading. The warning then suddenly just stopped. Air traffic control then instructed them to descend to 2,000 feet and turn on a heading of 265 degrees. The first officer then reduced the speed to 195 knots in order to extend the flaps. At this time, the auto throttle are still operating normally. Air traffic control then clears them on a heading of 210 degrees to intercept the ILS instrument approach for runway 18 right. As for an ILS approach, normally the pilots will select both autopilots. The procedure, which is the same for Boeing and Airbus, is to select the approach mode first before selecting the second autopilot. But this time, the first officer under training accidentally selected the second autopilot first, which is the Command A button, before selecting the approach mode. This essentially switched the autopilot channel from Command B to Command A. In normal conditions, this mistake is not detrimental because either autopilot can be used to fly the aircraft, but in this case, when he selected the autopilot tripped. The first officer then instinctively reselected Command B. However, the pilots did not discuss on why the autopilot tripped. The first officer continued flying using only one autopilot channel. They then selected flaps 5 and started reducing the speed. Then, the landing gear horn came up again for a few seconds. Well, if you like this video so far, do comment and subscribe. I appreciate you, and now back to the video. The first officer then called for flaps 5 and asked the captain to put the landing gear down. The reason why he asked early was that skip-roll control factored them to intercept the final much faster. This means that they are much closer to the runway and was high on the approach. For an airport in any capital city, the air traffic is usually congested with so many aircrafts taking off and landing. Therefore, aircrafts are normally sequenced to land with minimal separation. They intercept the localizer on a heading of 201 degrees. Then suddenly, things started to get weird. The MCP altitude is changed from 2,000 feet to 1,200 feet and then to 700 feet. MCP is the mode control panel for Boeing aircrafts. In the Airbus, it is called an FCU, Flight Control Unit. Do check out this video here if you have a FCU failure on the Airbus. Check later after this video, not now. Vertical speed was then selected on 500 feet per minute rate of descent and then 1,400 feet per minute rate of descent. For context, the normal rate of descent is 700 feet per minute, so this selection is double of the normal rate of descent. Now you might ask, why did the pilots did this? Well, because they intercepted finals at 5.5 nautical miles much earlier than normal. This meant that they were high on the approach, so they needed to increase the rate of descent in order to capture the normal profile, the normal glide down to the runway. As they were trying to get back to the normal profile, the captain roll bar flight director begins to flash and then disappear. As they intercepted the glide slope, signaling that they were on the correct normal glide for landing, the pitch bar on the captain's flight display disappeared. This is odd as normally the flight directors only disappear when the aircraft is flaring on the runway just before touchdown.
50, 30, 20, 10.
The safety pilot did remind the captain that his radio altimeter is not working, but it seems that there were no discussion on this issue. As they were descending faster than normal, the autothrottle has spooled the aircraft down to approach idle. This is to avoid the speed from increasing. Little did they know that the autothrottle was in retard mode, which was meant for landing, and this particular power setting was there for 98 seconds. Schiphol Airport then transferred them to the tower frequency.
Turkish 195 on contact tower, 1827 bye-bye.
1827 over there, thank you sir.
Once they contacted tower frequency, they were cleared to land on runway 18 right.
Turkish Airlines 51, good morning. Runway 18 right, clear to land, wind 210 at 9.
Clear land, thank you, 951.
At 1,000 feet, however, the aircraft was still not stabilized.
1,000.
What does it mean to be stabilized? In general, an aircraft is supposed to be at correct flap configuration, correct speed, on the glide slope and localizer with the correct power setting. The power setting at this point is roughly 50 to 60% N1. Most airlines select 1,000 feet above aerodrome level as the final point to either continue the approach or to go around. If the aircraft is too high or too fast or not stable in general, pilots are taught to go around. In this case, however, at 1,000 feet the plane was still not on flaps 40, and also the thrust setting was at idle power, meaning very little thrust. At 900 feet, flaps 40 was selected and the aircraft speed was at 158 knots. The speed brakes was armed. Immediately the warning light speed brakes arm and the speed brakes do not arm warning light came on. Usually in a Boeing aircraft, when this warning comes up, there is a quick reference handbook guidance to deal with the issue. This warning means that once the aircraft touches down, the speed brakes will not deploy automatically. The crew will then have to deploy the speed brakes manually, and this might affect the landing distance required. At this point, if there is a failure of non-dire emergency, it is prudent to execute a go-around. They completed the landing checklist below 1,000 feet and the safety pilot announced over the PA for the cabin crews to be seated for landing. At 500 feet, the aircraft speed is dropping dangerously as the power setting was still in idle setting. In order to maintain the glide slope, the aircraft kept pitching up to 11 degrees. Now, the situation is becoming much more dangerous. For context, the normal pitch for approach at flaps 40 is at 0 degrees. As the aircraft approaches 107 knots, the stick shaker was activated and the control yoke started vibrating. This indicated that the aircraft is approaching a stall. The pilots pushed the aircraft nose down and increased the power. The power setting then went back to the idle position. The captain then realizes that he does not have the speed he needs, disconnected the auto throttle. The autopilot then selected full power and started pitching nose up. However, this action came a little too late. Jet engines normally take a few seconds to spool up, and at 400 feet the aircraft was in a full stall. And then the plane crashed. Less than 1 mile away from the runway, the tail section struck the ground first and the plane broke into 3 pieces. The engines flung forward as the aircraft slams into the ground, and 9 people perished that day, including 5 passengers, 1 cabin crew, and all 3 pilots.
Good morning, Turkish 1951, descent 360 heading 310. Turkish 1951, good day, U-turn left heading 300, descent to flight level 150, runway 18 right. Start, heading 300, descending 180, confirm. Flight level 150, Turkish 1951, speed 300 knots or greater.
Good morning, Fiat 262 heading 310, recap, Foxtrot.
Turkish 1951 to confirm, heading 300, descend to flight level 150, and your speed 300 knots or greater. Heading 300 or greater, speed 300 or greater, heading 300, descend 150, 1951. Turkish 1951, descend to flight level 100 to be leveled by RTIP, maintain the speed. Heading to be descend 100, be level RTIP, 1951. Turkish 1951, descend to flight level 70 after RTIP to Sierra Papa Lima. 770, RTIP, Sierra Papa Lima, 1951. Turkish 1951, your speed 250 knots from contact approach, 19050, bye-bye. 250, 1905, have a good day, thank you, sir. Amsterdam, good morning, Turkish 1951, descending 70, speed 250.
Turkish 1951, hello, proceed Sierra Papa Yankee, descent to 40, speed okay for ILS 18 right.
Latvia 450, turn left heading 210, clear approach, 18 right.
Afternoon 210, clear approach, 18 right, and speed is now 18.
Roger sir, thank you. Break Turkish 1951, proceed about Sierra Papa Yankee, descent level 40, ILS 18 right.
Sierra Papa Yankee 40, 18 right, Turkish 1951.
Turkish 1951, descent to 2000, 1027.
2000, 1027, 1951.
Turkish 1951, turn left heading 210, clear approach, 18 right.
Left 210, clear 18 right, Turkish 1951.
Turkish 1951, contact tower, 1827, bye-bye.
1827, have a good day, thank you sir. Seven Tower, good morning, Turkish 1951, 18 right.
Turkish 1951, good morning. Runway 18 right, clear to land, wind 210 at 9.
Clear to land, thank you, 951.
Morning, this is 262, 1500, 18 right.
Yeah, 262, good morning, number 2.
Number 2.
Approximately Alpha, 10 miles, difficulty established.
Fly 78 Alpha, roger.
Flight slow. Airspeed low. Airspeed low. 500. Don't sink. Don't sink. Don't sink. Don't sink. Don't sink. Too low. Don't sink. Too low. Terrain. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up.
1951. 262, please go around. Yeah, 262, go around.
Go around, yeah, 262.
1951. Yeah, 262, do you see something on the ground which happened over there?
Negative, sir. We are in clouds. We are making this approach.
Okay. Fly 78 Alpha, go around, fly straight ahead.
Go around heading straight ahead, fly 7 Alpha.
Yeah, 262, contact departure 1212.
112.
78 Alpha, turn right, heading 260.
Tango 260, fly 7 Alpha. Fly 7 Alpha, what's the situation down on the ground? Can we expect another approach?
Fly 78 Alpha, well, we are at this moment looking at a very large emergency. It looks like we lost an aircraft, so continue on this heading, contact 1212.
On the heading 1212, fly 7 Alpha, cheers.
During the investigation, it was found out that the faulty radio altimeter was one of the causes that led to the accident. The faulty radio altimeter was a recurring issue in the Boeing 737. However, the fault is intermittent. Every time when the maintenance team tried to resolve this issue, the problem would disappear and then come up back again randomly. Boeing speculated that atmospheric moisture was the cause of the fault and took steps to mitigate it. But the problem still persisted. Boeing then issued a document about this. This was not included in the quick reference handbook list of procedure though. The pilots were expected to disconnect the auto throttle and use the throttles manually if it does not behave. The auto throttle then went to idle mode during a critical phase of flight that led the pilots to have insufficient speed and eventually stalled. The pilots also did not execute the go-around when they were not stable. During the approach, remember that the autopilot disconnected when the first officer selected Command A. Well, this was because of the faulty left radio altimeter on the captain's side. This could be an indication that the aircraft was not behaving as it should be, but this anomaly was not discussed by the pilots. The report also included that because of air traffic control tight vectoring, the pilots were subjected to high workload because they had to fly the plane that had a faulty equipment. Recommendations was then given to air traffic control to warn pilots if they are going to be given a shorter track. After the accident, further stall recovery procedures at low altitudes were emphasized. These exercises and training are normally given in the simulators during recurrent training. Let me know in the comments below on what do you think. If you have learned something new, do comment below and subscribe. Check out the playlist as well. Thank you very much for watching and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.